Life feels expensive in 2025, rents keep climbing, and even basic groceries eat up more of your paycheck. But what if there were countries willing to flip the script, offering relocation grants, visa pathways, and even tax incentives to attract new residents? These programs aren't all the same. Some are micro grants, others are large lump sums, or even startup funding. Exact amounts and eligibility shift quickly, so here we'll focus on the most current official details available. By the end, you'll know three things: what you actually get paid, the deadlines and conditions attached, and the biggest hidden costs that can erase the benefits. Later, we'll reveal which programs look generous on paper, but shrink after taxes and renovations. So how does this really work in practice? Let's start with one of the most surprising examples: Italy's new grant boost. Italy's new grant schemes give us one of the clearest examples of how paid-to-move programs really work once you read beyond the headlines. Although Italy is among the most visited countries on Earth, many of its rural towns are in sharp decline. Away from Rome, Florence, and Venice, entire villages face shrinking populations, empty schools, and fading main streets. To counter this trend, several municipalities have updated their rural revitalization incentives for 2025. Local governments from southern regions to islands such as Sardinia now offer relocation grants that typically fall between 10,000 and 30,000 euros. Reported examples include Prosicca Quarrica in Puglia, which public officials have discussed at around 30,000 euros, while many other towns advertise smaller sums. The clear intent is not to subsidize short breaks, but to bring back long-term residents willing to create permanent homes and sustain local economies. Eligibility rules highlight what Italy expects in return. Newcomers must not only purchase a qualifying property, they must also register permanent residency in the town and commit to staying for years rather than months. Many municipalities require buyers to take on older properties that have stood empty, in some cases specifying pre-1990s homes as the target. Regardless of the precise cutoff, the consistent theme is that you cannot buy a modern apartment and claim the money. You must restore buildings that otherwise risk abandonment. Authorities generally check that people really live there. Spending most of your time abroad or treating the home as a holiday property breaks the conditions. Applicants are also asked to prove stable income, since the state does not plan to cover household budgets. Retirees with pensions, freelancers on steady contracts, or remote workers may qualify, but those without a solid financial base are quickly screened out. What the promotional images often skip over is the true state of these houses. Visitors usually see postcard streets and rustic stone facades, but many eligible properties sit in disrepair after decades of neglect. Damaged walls, deteriorated roofs, and outdated plumbing are common. Renovation costs can run into the tens of thousands. As a benchmark, Sicily's famous €1 homes frequently require around 15,000 euros just for minimum repairs, and most rural restorations rise well beyond that into the mid-five-figure range. For potential buyers, the grant helps offset part of that expense, but does not come close to making the purchase free. Beyond construction work, hidden costs matter too. Property transfer taxes are due at the time of purchase, easily adding several thousand euros up front. Building permits, insurance, and compliance with regional codes add further bills before the home is livable. Inheritance rules can create long-term obligations if the house is passed on to children later. When all three costs, renovation, taxes and fees, and code compliance, are added together, the free money looks more like a partial subsidy embedded in a much larger financial plan. Applicants also face the slower rhythm of Italian bureaucracy. Timelines vary by municipality, but expect a process of months rather than days. Applications usually pass from the town council to regional administrators and in some cases require sign-off by higher authorities. During this wait, those applying must prepare notarized documents, provide certified translations, and respond to any additional requests. Errors in signatures or missing income evidence often trigger delays. For non-European Union citizens, the hurdles include more than paperwork. property purchases alone do not provide automatic residency. Long-term residence permits or specific visas, such as Italy's digital nomad visa, introduced to attract remote professionals, are required, along with proof of health insurance. These demands mean that getting permission to stay is separate from buying a house, and both have to align. The document checklist can feel extensive. Valid identification, background checks, income proof, and purchase contracts are just the start. To convince local authorities, the newcomer must show a clear plan to renovate and inhabit the house. For non-EU applicants, visa approval must slot into this same timeline, which often extends the waiting period. Success, therefore, hinges not only on meeting funding requirements, but also on careful coordination between municipal offices, consulates, and immigration authorities. Even after approval, cultural expectations play a role. Many of these towns rely almost entirely on Italian in daily life. Shops, schools, and public services assume residents are willing to participate in the language and community. Without at least basic Italian skills, integration becomes difficult, and isolation may outweigh the financial benefit of the grant. Authorities emphasize long-term presence rather than quick resales, because the survival of these towns depends as much on social renewal as on property repairs. Still, the scheme is not without appeal to certain groups. Remote professionals with steady earnings may accept the red tape in exchange for lower living costs once renovations finish. Retired couples with a savings cushion may find the grant an incentive to settle in a long-desired location. In these cases, the advertised 10,000 to 30,000 subsidies serve as a discount rather than a full solution. However, anyone approaching the program without significant additional resources risks falling into financial strain. When renovations move ahead, costs escalate quickly. Roof work, heating installation, and reliable plumbing require licensed contractors. Each step has to be inspected, with permits approved along the way. What starts as a picturesque impulse purchase can expand into a project demanding consistent management and deeper financing. Few buyers complete the process without investing at least 3 times the headline subsidy amount. That ratio captures both structural repairs and all associated fees. This brings us to a simple rule of thumb for anyone considering Italy's village incentives. Treat the grant as seed money, not as a full relocation package. Budget at least 3 times the sum offered, and make sure your visa path is secure from the outset. Only then do the numbers start to make sense, and only then do applicants stand a real chance of turning an empty house into a functioning home. And while Italy's approach revolves around property and reconstruction, other countries frame their incentives differently. Some put the emphasis not on crumbling houses, but on retaining skilled workers already trained locally. Canada's skilled graduate rewards. Could staying in a medium-sized Canadian city offer better long-term financial benefits than chasing jobs in Toronto or Vancouver? In 2025, provinces like Saskatchewan are betting on that idea through updated graduate retention programs. Instead of handing newcomers a one-time cash bonus, these initiatives reward recent graduates who stay and work locally with multi-year tax credits or reimbursements. The concept is simple. Complete your degree from an approved institution, commit to living and working in the province, and you receive tax relief over several years. Exact amounts and eligibility vary, and figures should always be confirmed on the province's official website before applying. But the structure consistently favors those under 35 who are early in their careers and willing to settle down. At a glance, this is less flashy than a large lump sum relocation grant. Compare one headline cash grant versus a steady multi-year tax credit. What's better depends on whether you want immediate cash flow or long-term cost reduction. The Canadian route lines up with stability. You don't receive a direct payment into your bank account. Instead, your provincial income tax bill is reduced each year you remain eligible. For many graduates, the trade-off works out because the relief accumulates year after year. The government's goal is clear: keep skilled graduates in the province, attract them to regional job markets, and slow the flow of talent out to larger urban centers. The commitment is significant, though, and it shapes who actually takes advantage of the credit. Graduates must apply within strict timelines and can only qualify through institutions the province has placed on its official list. Studying elsewhere, but hoping to transfer eligibility later won't work. Local credentials and proper applications are required. Age caps are also enforced, generally closing the door to older applicants who might otherwise consider the program. Once accepted, the expectations are simple in theory, but demanding in practice. Stay continuously employed in the province, remain a resident through the entire period, and file accurate annual tax returns without interruption. Missing even 1 year of filings or employment records can void the credit for that cycle. This long time frame presents both an incentive and a challenge. A graduate who wants to begin a career in Regina, Saskatoon, or another Saskatchewan city finds the program adds value over time. But it also means forecasting whether you will actually want to remain for close to a decade. New professionals often change careers, move for postgraduate study, or follow opportunities in other provinces. A move out of Saskatchewan ends participation immediately, and the credits for future years disappear. As a result, pursuing the program is a form of long-term contract, where the reward builds only if you're prepared to embed your career and lifestyle into the region. Unlike programs in Southern Europe that revolve around crumbling properties and construction bills, here the challenge is career sustainability. The credits tilt the scales towards sectors where steady demand exists, such as healthcare, teaching, engineering, and IT. While the overall provincial population remains small compared to Ontario or British Columbia, job markets here tend to have more consistent openings in those specialized roles. For graduates in those areas, the program can align perfectly with both employability and financial support. Language expectations play a smaller role, but they're not irrelevant. Saskatchewan functions mainly in English, yet proficiency in French can be an asset, particularly for government or corporate jobs with offices across Canada. Listing both official languages on a resume expands opportunities and can give a competitive edge. Most daily life for newcomers will be in English, but those with bilingual skills may find extra leverage when securing employment needed to stay eligible for the program. Immigration matters add another layer, particularly for international students. Obtaining a diploma or degree in Saskatchewan is not enough on its own to remain long-term. Foreign graduates usually pursue residency through provincial nominee streams or in Canada immigration pathways. Processing permanent residency applications often takes many months, sometimes over a year and a half, and applicants must maintain valid permits throughout that period. That includes consistent work authorizations, medical checks, and background verifications. Gaps in legal status can result in delays or refusal. In contrast, domestic graduates who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents avoid this extra immigration process, but both groups remain bound by the same ongoing tax filing and residency requirements linked to the credits. The financial upside becomes clearer when you set the support alongside Saskatchewan's cost of living. Life in Toronto or Vancouver strains even professional salaries. Rent and mortgage payments alone consume much of monthly income. Saskatchewan's mid-sized cities generally maintain lower housing costs, cheaper transportation, and lighter utility bills. This means that while the credit might seem modest spread over several years, its value compounds in a place where everyday life already costs less. Add the benefit of universal healthcare, and residents avoid the high personal medical bills common in some other countries. When calculated together, the savings make life in a smaller province sustainably affordable in a way that major cities cannot match. Still, the pacing divides opinion. Critics often argue that a larger upfront sum would create clearer motivation, especially for recent graduates managing debt. Receiving progressive credits, however, reinforces staying power. For residents already drawn to lower costs of living, the tax benefit becomes a steady reinforcement instead of a one-off windfall. The structure makes sense once you view it not as a gift, but as part of the overall financial landscape of a Canadian province trying to stabilize its workforce. Yet commitment is the sticking point. Few people in their 20s can guarantee they will stay in one province for 7 to 10 years. Life events, personal goals, and shifting opportunities can cut plans short. Those who do take on the program must be confident that the trade-off, career growth in a smaller city versus flexibility to move elsewhere, is worth it. For some, the lower costs, tax relief, and slower pace outweigh the pull of larger cities. For others, the long wait for benefits is too limiting. Paperwork remains a constant behind the scenes. Applicants must demonstrate accredited graduation, proper identification, reliable income, and annual consistency across tax years. Even minor mistakes on tax returns can delay or cancel credits. International applicants face heavier administrative burdens, permit renewals, job offer verification, and extended immigration forms. It isn't a system forgiving of errors, and scattered documentation is one of the most common reasons for rejection. The safest route is deliberate organization and annual review of requirements, ensuring no break in eligibility over the program's timeline. Seen from a distance, the graduate reward structure in Saskatchewan is not designed as a quick incentive. Instead, it functions as a partnership. If you build your professional life in the province, the government reduces your tax obligations year after year. While the sums themselves may not appear dramatic at first, within the framework of affordable housing, lower living costs, and comprehensive health care, the overall gains can add up to more than a lump sum program elsewhere. For anyone considering this path, the first practical step is straightforward. Check the province's official retention program or nominee list and confirm whether your degree and institution qualify. Many applicants stumble here by assuming automatic eligibility. If you're an international graduate, verify from the outset that your immigration status can align with the program's multi-year timeline and be prepared to maintain valid permits throughout. Without meeting these foundations, the promise of credits doesn't materialize. Gradual support tied to consistent presence is a very different model from relocation schemes elsewhere. Programs like these demonstrate that some governments prefer to build loyalty slowly rather than offer large sums all at once. And while that approach suits certain graduates, others may be more motivated by incentives structured around family growth and demographic renewal. Spain's rural family bonuses. What if your household could receive a financial reward not only for moving, but also for every child you raise in the community? That's the approach taken by certain northern Spanish towns, where local councils have tied relocation incentives directly to family growth. In Ponga, for example, officials have introduced a package aimed squarely at young families. The structure in 2025 includes an initial payment of about €3,000 for registering residency, followed by an additional €3,000 for each child born and officially registered in the town after relocation. Editor note: confirm the municipality's most recent official figures before recording, as sums can change year to year. Taken together, a couple who relocate and then raise 2 children during their 5-year commitment could earn €9,000 in direct transfers. While smaller in headline size compared to grants elsewhere, the bonus is tailored to meet the town's demographic challenge, keeping schools open, sustaining public services, and replenishing shrinking communities. The funding is not automatic. To qualify, households must register permanent residency and remain for a minimum of 5 years. Officials don't rely on declarations alone. They confirm presence through enrollment of children in local schools, as well as tax and health service registration. The priority is stability, not short visits. Ponga, like many rural towns, has seen sharp depopulation as younger generations leave for career opportunities in larger cities. Empty schools and boarded-up houses threaten the survival of day-to-day services. For local councils, the bonus is less about financial generosity and more about the basic survival of civic life. Applicants also need to demonstrate financial stability from the outset. The relocation payment is seen as a contribution to early expenses, not as full support. Families must show proof of stable income through job contracts, freelance records, or adequate pensions before being approved. Authorities want residents who can cover living costs and contribute to local economic health rather than households arriving dependent on limited municipal budgets. Applications without clear income proof are often rejected, since the council cannot risk encouraging families that would later struggle to stay afloat. For residents already inside the European Union, relocation is simpler. EU citizens can move freely, obtain local residency, and register under the program without special permission. For families outside the EU, however, the process involves an additional immigration layer. Popular visa routes include the non-lucrative visa, which suits retirees or those living on external income, and work visas supported by a Spanish employer. Each visa requires submission through a Spanish consulate in the applicant's home country before relocation. The requirements include medical insurance, criminal record checks, proof of significant savings, often in the €30,000 range, and official translations of documents. Processing can stretch over months, and some families give up when faced with the complexity. Without completing the visa process, even families who look eligible on paper cannot legally reside in Spain or register for bonuses. Taxation is another factor that reshapes the headline numbers. Spain applies a progressive income tax, starting at 19% and climbing to 45% at higher earnings. Residents also face social security contributions, municipal charges, and VAT on everyday purchases. Additionally, Spain taxes worldwide income for permanent residents. This means remote workers or families with overseas investments must declare that income locally, which can lead to unexpected liabilities. The small transfers offered by Ponga are subject to the same system and do not alter core obligations. Anyone considering these schemes should consult a tax professional first and review whether Spain has a double taxation treaty with their country of origin. For households miscalculating tax impact, the net value of the relocation support can quickly shrink. Geography only adds to the trade-off. Ponga sits in a mountainous, rural region. The setting is scenic, yet far removed from major job markets. Commuting is difficult, and public transport remains limited. Daily convenience services are fewer, and while regular healthcare is available, specialized treatments typically require travel to larger cities. Local schools exist, but choices narrow as children get older. Remote work, therefore, becomes the most practical option for professional continuity. For families used to city infrastructure and diverse opportunities, this isolation calls for careful consideration of lifestyle priorities. That said, for certain types of families, the structure makes sense. Couples already planning to have children may find the child bonus a useful subsidy for growing household costs. Low housing costs and smaller daily expenses allow the transfers to stretch further. Families with remote employment can enjoy the financial relief of living in an affordable region while receiving modest but real support for their family plans. For them, the program forms part of a sustainable plan rather than a sole motivator. On the other hand, professionals whose careers depend on rapid advancement in larger centers will likely struggle with the 5-year residency requirement. Stepping away from hubs in Madrid or Barcelona or from international markets can stall career momentum. The local bonus system does not compensate for missed promotions or industry networking opportunities. Deciding to move depends on whether family-focused living outweighs professional opportunity costs. Cultural integration adds another layer. Rural Spanish towns maintain distinct traditions, festivals, and community networks. Integration requires more than paperwork. Families are expected to participate in schools, neighborhood associations, and local events, with Spanish as the primary language of communication. Those who do not adapt linguistically or socially may face isolation. The bonuses are structured to encourage not only physical relocation, but also genuine integration, and authorities prefer residents committed to these small communities. Documentation remains a decisive factor. Identity records, proof of income, and crucially, official birth certificates of children born after relocation must be provided according to clear deadlines. Authorities can demand reimbursement if families ignore the 5-year rule or submit incomplete documentation. These safeguards filter out participants seeking short-term gains or failing to prepare carefully. To help listeners remember the essentials, there are 3 key checkpoints families should review. First, ensure official residency registration and, when applicable, children's enrollment in public services. Without this, bonuses are not approved. Second, confirm your visa route if coming from outside the EU, understanding that each program requires separate consular steps and can take months to process. Third, prepare realistic financial projections that include Spain's tax system, potential global income liability, and ongoing living costs. When these conditions align, Spain's rural family bonuses can ease expenses and make small-town life more affordable, even if the transfers are modest. Relocation here works best for families who already want to raise children in quieter environments with stronger community ties. But if your motivation is quick profit, the numbers and requirements make it far less appealing. Not all governments design incentives around families and schools, though. Elsewhere, some countries shape their programs to attract entirely different groups, especially those building businesses with global potential. Chile's entrepreneurial magnet. In South America, one country has been steadily positioning itself as a magnet for entrepreneurs seeking both funding and a supportive environment. That country is Chile, and at the center of its strategy sits Startup Chile, one of the most recognized accelerator programs in the region. Launched over a decade ago, it was designed to diversify an economy long defined by mining and agriculture. By 2025, it has become a structured gateway for founders around the world, offering not just funding, but also a pathway to build companies in Santiago and beyond. What Startup Chile offers is not a single grant figure, but a tiered system of support that matches the stage of the business. Early projects enter through the Build program, with around 15 million Chilean pesos in backing, roughly $15,000. More advanced startups that already have a functional product can apply for the Ignite stage, adding support of around $25,000, sometimes with options to extend. For more established ventures showing genuine traction and growth potential, the growth tier offers up to about 75 million pesos, close to $100,000. The idea is simple: seed different levels of development with capital while connecting entrepreneurs to Chile's ecosystem. Unlike relocation schemes designed to fill population gaps, this funding is directly tied to scalability. Acceptance is competitive, and the program makes it clear it wants investor-ready projects, not side hustles or hobbies. Each grant also comes bundled with the accelerator's non-financial benefits, workspace options, mentoring, and opportunities to connect with Chilean and regional venture capital investors. For many founders, these networks are as valuable as the cash. Placement in Startup Chile often signals credibility to outside investors, helping companies raise additional funding later, but the money itself does not appear automatically. Entry into the program depends on a rigorous vetting process that begins with a detailed proposal covering market potential, customer acquisition plans, and financial projections. After initial screening, candidates often face interviews with panels of mentors and program officers, where the strength of the founder and the long-term sustainability of the startup are evaluated in detail. On timing, acceptance is not immediate. Startup Chile runs cohorts, and depending on the cycle, the full application and review loop can take between 4 and 6 months. That schedule means founders need contingency financing and patience. For those not accepted into one round, the only option is waiting for the next cohort. With hundreds of international applications pouring in, competition is steep, so being prepared with a clear revenue model and evidence of product demand makes a significant difference. Alongside the funding mechanism, acceptance into Startup Chile includes a visa framework designed specifically for foreign entrepreneurs. Typically valid for 1 year, this visa grants legal residence in Chile while participants build out their business. Renewal is tied directly to progress reports. Founders are expected to show measurable results, whether through hiring, active customer acquisition, or raising outside investment. If growth evidence is thin, visa extension approval becomes uncertain. This design ensures that participation benefits both the founder and the country, rather than functioning as an open relocation path. What Startup Chile requires from participants extends well beyond creative ideas. Once selected, entrepreneurs must legally register their business in Chile, a requirement that brings legal fees, compliance costs, and ongoing obligations. Lawyers and accountants are often hired to manage incorporation and filings, especially as documents must be produced under Chilean corporate law. For most startups, this initial setup consumes several $1,000s of capital even before operations begin. Employment laws also carry weight. While the program does not mandate immediate hiring, reviews often factor in whether founders have begun employing locals, which means social security contributions and benefits become part of realistic cost planning. Another critical element is expenditure tracking. The program specifies that grant money be used only toward business purposes. Every purchase, from software subscriptions and marketing to travel and laptops, must be documented in reports and supported with receipts. Audits are normal. Misuse, even unintentionally, can halt further funding. Unlike relocation grants in Europe that focus on housing renovations, Chile demands founders run their business finances through a level of reporting comparable to early venture capital oversight. Those who treat the grant casually or blur personal and business expenses often lose eligibility. Despite the demands, the opportunities are significant. Relative to much of Latin America, Chile is business-friendly in both infrastructure and taxation. Certain profits reinvested in company activities benefit from lighter tax rates than in surrounding economies. This framework allows startups to maintain momentum, stretch capital, and focus on reinvestment rather than returning earnings immediately. Beyond tax considerations, acceptance provides access to the entrepreneurial community clustered in Santiago, a network of alumni, mentors, and investors that has already propelled startups to regional and global recognition. These ties often carry weight far beyond the value of the initial grant, opening doors to venture firms and regional partnerships. For participants who perform well, residency stability is a longer-term prospect. Founders who can show consistent growth and contribution to the local economy may convert program visas into more enduring residence permits. This positions Startup Chile as not only a funding pipeline, but also a launchpad for building a lasting base in South America. Still, the key filter never changes. The program is for scalable businesses with evidence of traction. Entrepreneurs without a strong, validated model almost always find themselves passed over. The reality is that Startup Chile functions more as a national venture fund, an accelerator rolled into one, than as a relocation bonus. To make the most of it, applicants must come armed with complete business plans, proof of demand, operational discipline, and capacity for compliance. In other words, don't apply unless you can show clear market traction and a plan with a long enough runway to justify the investment. These strict expectations highlight how different countries shape incentives to match their priorities. And while Chile ties its support directly to founders building scalable companies, other nations in 2025 are experimenting with more individual-focused ways of encouraging residents to move, approaches structured less around startups and more around flexible work itself. Ireland's remote worker incentives. Ireland may be best known for hosting the European headquarters of major global tech firms, yet its recent policies are increasingly directed at individuals rather than corporations. Between 2024 and 2025, government initiatives started offering targeted support for remote workers, especially those willing to relocate to rural counties and outlying regions. Rather than centering everything around Dublin or Cork, the goal is to channel people and spending power into areas that have faced slow decline in recent decades. There are two main strands worth noting. First is the Our Living Islands program, which focuses on repopulating Ireland's offshore islands. This scheme offers refurbishment grants that can reach up to €84,000 in certain cases, with funds earmarked specifically for repairing or upgrading existing homes. The intention is to bring life back to small settlements that risk permanent depopulation without new residents. Importantly, while the sums involved are large, this particular program is tied strictly to property restoration and does not provide a pathway for visas or immigration status. It is open mainly to those who already have legal residency. Alongside it, smaller county-level relocation grants exist, often capped around €10,000, designed to help remote workers cover housing or co-working space in rural Western or Midland counties. These smaller programs vary by council and should always be verified locally before applying, as the details and availability shift from year to year. This shift toward individual relocation marks a contrast with Ireland's earlier focus on corporate tax arrangements. For decades, multinational companies benefited from special low tax rates and incentives, creating strong hubs around big cities. Now, certain funds are flowing toward people on an individual level, encouraging workers to bring existing digital jobs with them into less populated regions. Remote employees, freelancers, or entrepreneurs can benefit if their work is fully portable, but only if they are willing to live outside the best-known urban centers. Eligibility rules depend heavily on an applicant's background. Citizens of EU and EFTA states experience the simplest entry, since freedom of movement allows them to relocate and register with relatively limited bureaucracy. For non-EU or non-EEA applicants, the process is more demanding. Authorities require that remote workers first secure a valid permit or visa that allows them to legally live and work in Ireland. Applicants must provide proof of steady income, with thresholds designed to filter out households that would rely solely on grants. In addition, proof of private health insurance is mandatory, especially while residency documents are being processed. Missing documents or incomplete applications often result in immediate rejection, even before local councils consider the financial aid request. The health insurance requirement reflects the structure of Ireland's health system. While residents can access public hospitals, waiting times for appointments and treatments remain long in many areas. Private insurance is strongly encouraged and, in practice, essential for faster access. For new arrivals, particularly those from outside the EU, proof of such coverage is non-negotiable. This means that although the state may provide up to €10,000 for housing support, annual insurance fees quickly claw back part of that benefit. Applicants should plan for this cost when evaluating the true financial impact of any grant. Life in Irish rural areas also introduces cultural factors. Some of the island settlements and western regions are part of the Gaeltacht, communities where Irish Gaelic remains the daily language in schools, shops, and public services. While English is widely spoken across the country, active participation in local life becomes richer and easier when newcomers are open to using some Irish words and understanding cultural traditions. Lack of engagement often leads to social isolation, even if the move is financially supported. Authorities emphasize integration as much as occupation of housing, since the success of these incentives depends on residents genuinely embedding themselves in local communities. Practical lifestyle adjustments are also unavoidable. Compared to Dublin, rural towns have far fewer immediate services. Entertainment, airports, and specialist medical facilities may require long travel. Broadband connections are improving but may not match urban standards. Applicants need to be realistic. They gain quieter living, lower housing costs, and natural surroundings, but at the trade-off of limited city-style convenience. For individuals seeking balance and calm, this trade-off works well. For those who thrive on high-tempo environments, it can feel restrictive after only a few months. Processing times are another critical piece. Securing a work permit or visa for those outside the EU can take many months, and only once this is resolved can applicants approach local councils to claim a relocation grant. Even then, funds are not transferred up front. Councils usually require proof that applicants have signed leases or purchased properties in designated counties, along with deposits of their income records. The funds typically arrive in installments after documentation is verified. This means that those planning the move should budget for full living expenses for the early months without assuming instant access to support. Taxation forms one of the largest hidden adjustments. Ireland employs progressive income tax brackets, with rates climbing close to 40% at higher earnings. In addition, residency can trigger taxation on worldwide income. For remote workers contracted by overseas companies or running freelance projects abroad, this means declaring foreign earnings to Irish Revenue Services. The housing grant eases initial settlement, but annual tax bills can surpass those savings. Prospective movers should consult a qualified tax advisor before committing, ensuring clarity on how income will be treated once Irish residency is established. Applications also encounter delays for technical reasons. Employment contracts often need formal translations. Discrepancies between tax filings and application claims can cause verification issues, and incorrectly filled documents can result in outright denial. The advice from both local officials and successful applicants is consistent. Prepare every supporting document months in advance, use certified translations, and maintain a consistent financial trail. The more complete the package on day one, the smoother the process tends to run. Despite hurdles, the appeal remains strong. Rural housing is relatively inexpensive, especially compared to Dublin's soaring prices. Co-working hubs supported by councils create social outlets and provide infrastructure for remote professionals. The grants, even when modest, help offset relocation costs during the adjustment period. And for families or individuals already planning to work remotely, shifting to quieter counties brings both financial and lifestyle advantages. At the same time, Ireland's programs are designed to generate regional benefits, not just quick personal gains. The money is directed toward property refurbishment, local landlords, small businesses, and trades. Long-term integration is expected. Those who approach the scheme with only the figure in mind, without planning for tax burdens, insurance, and cultural change, are unlikely to view it as successful. Those who arrive with stable outside income, an organized visa plan, and a genuine interest in the communities stand the best chance of turning the support into a sustainable quality of life. Ultimately, Ireland's remote worker incentives highlight a layered approach. Applicants need to think far beyond the headline number: readiness to meet visa conditions, private insurance obligations, tax implications, community integration, and a slower-paced lifestyle all weigh equally in the balance. For prepared professionals, the grants narrow the financial gap between ambition and reality, while the deeper costs remind them that relocation support helps, but never replaces, the personal resources needed to sustain a move long-term. And while Ireland's initiatives focus heavily on relocation grants linked to rural living and refurbishment, other European countries in 2025 are offering a completely different hook: schemes based on ultra-low property costs that appear almost unbelievable at first glance. Croatia's ultra-cheap housing scheme. Croatia has drawn attention in 2025 for a program that appears to make home ownership almost cost-free. Several small towns, faced with shrinking populations and abandoned housing, have begun selling empty properties for symbolic prices. In places such as Legrad, local councils have even sold homes for as little as the equivalent of 16 cents, making headlines across Europe. To encourage actual settlement and not just speculation, these offers are often paired with modest refurbishment support, grants of a few thousand euros, sometimes around 4,000 euros toward renovations, along with strict conditions around who can apply and how long they must remain. The offer begins with a symbolic purchase, but the reality is that the houses involved are frequently in poor shape. Many stand empty because younger generations have moved to Zagreb or left Croatia altogether, leaving behind structures with declining value. Governments hope that new owners will invest time and money to make these buildings habitable again, bringing families into communities where schools and local services would otherwise close. By pricing homes at a token amount, councils remove the upfront barrier, but then add rules to ensure this is living accommodation rather than vacation housing. Eligibility filters play a major role. In Legrad, for instance, purchase offers have been limited to applicants under the age of 45, part of an effort to attract younger residents and families. Proof of financial stability is another standard requirement. Applicants are expected to provide evidence of income that will sustain living costs and cover renovation. Savings alone rarely suffice. Authorities want to see employment records, pension statements, or freelance contracts sufficient to demonstrate self-sufficiency. In addition, municipalities generally impose residency commitments. Depending on the town, this can stretch from 10 to 15 years. Walk away before the end of that period, and you risk losing the property or being liable for repayment. These measures exist because earlier schemes failed when new owners quickly abandoned projects or treated them as short-term holiday investments. So is a €1 house really cheaper than renting for years? The quick answer: rarely. Budget for renovations, permits, and paperwork. The missing context is that properties available under these schemes usually require major work. Councils do not allow owners to leave homes half-finished. Instead, they set deadlines, often within 3 years, by which the home must meet minimum living standards. The renovation costs are substantial. Roofs need replacement, walls demand reinforcement, plumbing and electrical lines must be modernized, and many properties need foundational work. These upgrades run into tens of thousands of euros. While a grant of €4,000 or even €10,000 might be advertised, this covers only a small part of the outlay. For families with steady outside income, such as remote workers, the model may be feasible, but the expense must be planned from the start. Construction challenges add to the burden. In rural Croatia, specialized contractors may be hard to find. Skilled workers often travel in from larger cities, adding to costs through per diem rates and longer schedules. Building materials must sometimes be imported, pushing budgets higher. On top of this, local councils monitor progress closely. If renovation milestones aren't met, the property may be reclaimed by the municipality, and any money already invested in partial repairs is lost. The system is deliberately strict, with authorities determined to ensure that settlements grow back into functioning communities rather than being used for idle speculation. Then there are practical financial obligations beyond construction. Even after purchasing for €1, owners must pay fees for property transfers, local taxes, and inspection permits. Once the house is habitable, ongoing property taxes and maintenance are the owner's responsibility. Legal services also come into play when securing contracts, registering ownership, and obtaining approval from municipal councils. Each layer adds cost to what started as a symbolic purchase. Work and income remain another critical factor. Rural Croatia does not offer booming job markets to new arrivals. Many of these towns depend on seasonal tourism or small-scale agriculture. Salaries in these sectors fall below national averages, often making them insufficient to sustain renovation costs or daily living standards for newcomers. Recognizing this, councils request proof of stable income upfront to avoid failed resettlements. The program is far better suited to individuals or families already employed remotely or self-employed in professional fields. Without external income streams, surviving the lengthy residency period becomes difficult. For EU citizens, moving into the scheme is relatively straightforward. The right of free movement allows participation with fewer immigration hurdles, provided all municipal requirements are met. But for non-EU nationals, the picture looks different. A property purchase in Croatia does not automatically provide the right to live there. Non-EU applicants must secure temporary or long-term residence permits in separate procedures. These are time-consuming, requiring detailed applications, regular renewals, and ongoing documentation of income and insurance. Authorities conduct background checks and insist that residents provide official translations of every legal document. Even after securing one property, families may need to navigate months of visa processing before being officially allowed to live there. This can discourage many interested buyers, leading to misunderstandings about what the program actually offers. In short, buying a €1 house does not solve immigration challenges. Language integration adds another barrier. Croatian is the dominant medium for official documents, school systems, and everyday commercial interactions. While English is spoken among younger generations, particularly in larger cities, Smaller rural communities operate locally in Croatian. Translation fees, hiring interpreters, and the time needed to learn the language all become additional costs for settlement. Without at least a basic command of Croatian, dealing with bureaucratic paperwork and council procedures is far more difficult. The symbolic low purchase price is powerful marketing. It spreads quickly, suggesting ownership can be cheaper than a cup of coffee. But the serious reality is different. Those who succeed in this program are not casual speculators, but households with the patience, funding, and career flexibility to see 10 to 15 years through. For them, the rewards are tangible: a restored property, a stable community, and a foothold in a quieter part of Europe. For others, the gap between the headline number and the financial and legal commitments proves overwhelming. Ultimately, these Croatian housing schemes underline how governments in struggling regions use symbolic measures to attract residents. What looks like a zero-cost deal is actually a test of long-term commitment and financial readiness. Municipalities gain new families and restored properties, while participants gain housing at a fraction of urban prices, but only if they cover the full spectrum of hidden costs. And while Croatia uses ultra-low housing costs as its main attraction, other nations in 2025 take a different path, offering financial incentives more directly in cash form and linking those offers to strict age and residency conditions. Switzerland's Alpine cash offers. Switzerland offers one of the more surprising examples of relocation incentives in 2025. Despite being one of the wealthiest countries in Europe, certain Alpine villages are putting forward cash rewards to attract new arrivals. The most frequently mentioned case is Alpine, a small community in the canton of Valais, where relocation bonuses stand at 25,000 Swiss francs per adult applicant under the age of 45 and 10,000 francs per child. For a family of 4, the potential payout can approach 70,000 francs in total, a striking figure for a village surrounded by dramatic mountain scenery. Yet the headline number is only a surface detail. Behind it sits a set of strict financial, residential, and legal commitments that define who can actually benefit. Albanian's goal is clear: draw in younger families who can stabilize the population and sustain local schools and public services. The age limit of 45 excludes retirees or late career applicants, and the 10-year residency requirement aims to filter out short-term moves. Families must register permanent residents, live in the village full-time, and demonstrate that they intend to integrate. Leaving early or treating the location as a holiday home risks losing the grant and in some cases repaying what has already been received. The message is straightforward: this program is tied to long-term renewal, not temporary relocation. The financial commitment is one of the biggest barriers. Reports of specific minimum investment thresholds, often cited around 200,000 francs or more, appear in summaries of the program, but the exact requirement is subject to municipal confirmation. What is consistent is that applicants are expected to purchase or build property at a significant cost, with the grant acting more like a modest discount rather than a life-changing windfall. In reality, the payout covers a small portion of total expenses. Anyone approaching Albanin as a low-cost way into Swiss housing will discover that substantial personal capital is essential to qualify in the first place. This financial bar is compounded by the realities of the Swiss immigration system. Unlike EU member states where freedom of movement eases relocation, Switzerland places firm restrictions on who can reside permanently. For EU and EFTA citizens, securing residence is more straightforward, but still requires compliance with cantonal and federal rules. For non-EU nationals, the process is far stricter. A property purchase does not automatically come with residency rights. Prospective applicants must apply for the correct residency permit, demonstrate reliable income, show savings in reserve, and prove access to comprehensive health coverage. Application costs, legal paperwork, and waiting periods can add thousands of francs before a single payment from Albanin is ever received. The key point is that the relocation cash does not replace immigration requirements. It comes only after they are met. Cantonal rules also shape the experience. Albanin sits within Valais, and local authorities have discretion in how applications are handled. Wealth and property ownership are not sufficient on their own. Integration plays a central role, and language proficiency is part of that. Alpine is in a German-speaking region, and without adequate German language ability, renewing residence permits or securing long-term acceptance is difficult. Language courses, exams, and integration programs are often necessary. Cultural participation within the village is also monitored. Families are expected to enroll children in local schools, join in community life, and use the village as their primary home. Taken together, these conditions create a profile of the ideal applicant: under 45, financially secure, able to fund property acquisition, and ready to live in Alpine year-round. Most successful applicants are EU citizens or permanent residents already within Switzerland. For non-EU households, the combination of visa hurdles, high costs, and language requirements limits feasibility. Those who do qualify must also think carefully about employment, as job opportunities in a small Alpine village are limited. Remote work or significant independent wealth is the most practical path, since expecting regular local employment to cover Swiss living expenses is unrealistic. Anyone considering the program should test remote work infrastructure in advance and evaluate whether career plans remain viable in such a setting. While these financial and legal barriers are significant, the everyday costs of life in Switzerland add an additional layer. Health insurance is mandatory for all residents, with monthly premiums considerably higher than many other European countries. Families must budget thousands annually simply for coverage. Property taxes, recurring fees, and the ongoing maintenance burden of mountain homes, snow removal, roof repairs, heating costs, further raise annual outlays. Food, transportation, and service costs also rank among the highest in Europe. For many families, the relocation payment, even at 70,000 francs, is consumed quickly under these conditions. Rather than treating these costs separately, it is best to see them as three combined barriers: the high upfront expense of property acquisition, the challenges of securing and maintaining legal residency, and the ongoing expense of living in one of the world's most costly environments. For applicants who can comfortably clear all three, Alpine represents a unique opportunity. For those unable to sustain them, the program is more of a headline curiosity than a realistic option. Documentation demands reinforce the seriousness of the initiative. Proof of identity, financial stability, and legal household arrangements are required. Purchase or construction contracts must be in place before payments are made. Authorities check regularly that properties are used as full-time residences rather than secondary homes or rental sites. Compliance inspections and school enrollment checks confirm that newcomers are genuinely part of the village. Casual participation is not permitted. Applicants who succeed can reduce their effective housing outlay by tens of thousands of francs. For example, a young couple with 2 children can receive 70,000 francs, reducing the pressure of property costs. While small compared to the total price of buying or building a Swiss home, this bonus is meaningful within the framework of long-term settlement. Alpine's program signals that even wealthy nations see the risk of rural depopulation and are willing to use targeted incentives to protect community viability. Villages like Alpine need sustainable population levels to keep schools filled, infrastructure active, and traditions alive. Ultimately, Switzerland's Alpine cash offer is not a broad relocation grant for anyone looking to move abroad. It is an exacting contract aimed at a narrowly defined group: young, affluent families willing to integrate fully and commit to living in a small community for a decade or more. The extra funds ease the burden, but do not alter the fundamental economics of Swiss life. Success depends less on the amount received and more on whether applicants can meet the demanding combination of financial, legal, and cultural requirements that come with it. From the outside, the idea of being paid to live in an Alpine village is striking. From the inside, it looks more like a selective partnership where residents prove commitment before being rewarded. And as we move from Switzerland's mountain communities, another form of incentive emerges, this time not a property grant or a one-time cash bonus, but a monthly stipend designed to tempt families to settle in one of Europe's most remote island settings. Greece's remote island stipends. Greece adds another angle to these relocation schemes with one of the most unusual incentives currently linked to its islands. On Antikythera, a rocky and remote spot in the Aegean, families have been invited not just to move, but to receive financial support for doing so. What makes the offer stand out is its form. The local Orthodox Church and community officials pledged to provide relocating families with a fully furnished house, a small parcel of land, and a stipend of about €500 per month for the first 3 years. The purpose is not simply to fill homes, but to reverse decades of decline that have left only a few dozen permanent residents, most of them elderly. The principle is straightforward. Families are needed to keep Antikythera alive. With fewer than 40 full-time inhabitants in recent years, the island has struggled to maintain basic services. Shops, public facilities, and even the electricity grid have been disrupted by the tiny population. By offering housing and financial assistance, local leaders hope younger families with children will return a sense of permanence. Unlike many other European programs that revolve around property restoration or one-time payments, this approach is structured like a steady allowance, signaling that newcomers are expected to stay, raise children, and contribute socially. Eligibility, however, is narrow. Preference is given to families under 50 years old, with young children ranking highest in priority because their presence ensures schools stay open. Single individuals or older couples rarely make it past the first stage. Candidates are also expected to provide evidence of reliable income beyond the stipend. Authorities know that €500 per month cannot realistically cover the costs of island life, so they require proof of remote work, small business operations, or stable pensions as part of the application. This vetting process filters out applicants who may see the allowance as a simple salary and separates those suited for long-term settlement from those drawn only by the promise of a stipend. Verifying permanent residency forms another layer of control. Families must show they are living on Antikythera full-time, supported by school enrollment records, utility bills, and local registration. Authorities have made it plain that this is not a part-time retreat or seasonal vacation scheme. Families who attempt to live elsewhere while collecting payments are cut from the program. The stipend is explicitly conditional on year-round presence and integration into the community. The paperwork required is extensive but simple in intent. Families gather birth certificates, identity cards, financial records, and health insurance documents. Because Greek is the operating language, translations are usually needed. Completed applications pass from local councils to church representatives and may take months to finalize. Families that underestimate the delay sometimes arrange moves too early, only to find that formal approval lags behind. As with other small community schemes, the process demands patience. Moreover, prospective applicants should be aware that these island offers are not permanent fixtures. Some community incentive programs have run for only a short time before funding or administrative capacity was exhausted. That uncertainty means the Antikythera stipend, while genuine, cannot be assumed to last indefinitely. Practical conditions shape the daily reality more than the promise of free housing or a modest monthly income. The island is located between Crete and the Peloponnese, with a ferry journey of 9 hours to Athens under normal conditions. Rough seas can turn that into an even longer trip or cancel crossings altogether. As a consequence, access to jobs and services on the mainland is largely out of reach. Basic health care exists on the island, but serious issues require evacuation, often by helicopter when weather permits. Families must plan around this, especially if they have children who may need specialist care or regular treatments. Travel delays also complicate education. While a primary school operates locally, secondary schooling typically requires commuting off-island, which many families find unsustainable. The practical result is that the stipend offsets some inconvenience, but does not erase the realities of living so remotely. The suitability of the program, therefore, rests heavily on household circumstances. Families who rely on jobs that require city offices or in-person networking quickly find the island environment incompatible. Antikythera itself supports almost no economy beyond small-scale agriculture and occasional fishing. Internet connections allow for some remote work, but coverage is not reliable enough for every profession. Those depending on online businesses must confirm the infrastructure can support them before relocation. For many, the only workable arrangement is to combine the stipend with secure remote income already in place. Without that, the financial arithmetic of island life shifts from attractive to unsustainable very quickly. The local community also expects integration, not isolation. Settlers are few, and social ties run close in villages this small. Speaking Greek is not optional, it is the working language of schools, municipal offices, and everyday life, particularly among older residents. Newcomers need to engage in local activities, festivals, and community associations to be welcomed. A family that ignores cultural customs will face isolation, which combined with physical remoteness can make daily life exhausting. The stipend cannot compensate for a lack of social belonging, and survival in such communities relies on genuine connection as much as on money. What the allowance, housing, and land provide is a foundation. They reduce the initial burden of relocation by removing rent and creating financial buffer. Gardening or small farming on the provided land can lower grocery costs. For families that value quiet life, closer community bonds, and slower rhythms, the trade-off makes sense. The €500 function more like supplementary help than full support. Residents who arrive with realistic expectations often find long-term stability and treat the stipend as a useful addition instead of a transformational benefit. For those tempted by the idea of living in a Mediterranean paradise without preparing for the challenges, the gap between the brochure and reality is wide. Travel delays, limited health services, the absence of a robust economy, and strict residency rules cut sharply against any illusion of an easy life. Authorities have been explicit. They are not recruiting holiday homeowners or career climbers seeking quick advantages, but families determined to make the island their permanent home. This example shows how far small communities may go to fight depopulation, using steady stipends as a lure, but demanding proof of income, residency, and children in return. It is not a universal invitation, but a narrow, intentional effort to rebuild from within. For the right kind of family, young, adaptable, and already financially stable, it creates a framework that makes island living possible. For those hoping the cash and gifts alone will sustain a household, the reality is less forgiving. As relocation incentives evolve, the contrasts become sharper. Some countries use property giveaways, others provide cash bonuses, and in rare cases communities experiment with monthly stipends. But elsewhere in Europe, the incentives are shifting again, away from symbolic offers toward new residency structures designed for working professionals. Portugal's 2025 Golden Visa Alternatives. Portugal has shifted the focus of its immigration incentives in 2025 toward a very different set of priorities. For years, its Golden Visa was the country's headline policy, centered largely on real estate investment. That scheme brought billions into Lisbon and Porto, but also drew tough criticism. Housing prices surged, rents escalated, and ordinary Portuguese residents felt squeezed out. By 2023, public pressure forced the government to rethink. The real estate-driven Golden Visa channels were phased out, and in their place came a patchwork of targeted residency routes, digital nomad permits, and local relocation incentives designed to bring people into communities without fueling speculation in urban property markets. The policy shift reflects a straight trade-off: reduce property speculation while still attracting international talent. Instead of offering residency to anyone able to buy expensive apartments, Portugal now emphasizes professionals, workers, and entrepreneurs willing to settle and participate. Some municipalities promote modest relocation incentives, while the central government has set up new visa categories tied directly to skills or remote income. Exact municipal benefits vary widely. Some local programs list cash contributions, others provide subsidized housing or co-working assistance, and the only reliable step is to check each council's official announcements at the point of application. There is no single flat figure to rely on at the national level. One of the most visible replacements for the Golden Visa is the Digital Nomad Visa, officially the D8. This route permits remote workers or online business owners to live in Portugal while earning abroad, but it comes with clear income requirements. Recent guidance has listed a threshold of around €3,480 in monthly earnings, which applicants must prove through contracts, bank statements, or invoices. Without documented proof of stable income at that level, approval is unlikely. For individuals in tech, consulting, or similar portable fields, this option offers a legal path to residency without requiring local hiring from the start. For Portugal, it ensures that new arrivals support themselves and contribute through taxes without displacing locals in constrained urban job markets. At the same time, smaller municipal relocation programs target families and professionals to revitalize interior regions. Conditions usually include establishing permanent residence, enrolling in local services, and sometimes presenting formal work plans or commitments. These schemes are about real presence rather than absentee ownership. Municipalities want teachers, healthcare staff, engineers, and remote workers, not just investors holding deeds on empty flats. This refocus lines up with the wider political priority of protecting local housing markets while still welcoming outsiders who build long-term ties. Requirements are straightforward in outline but demanding in practice. Residency is tied to a minimum stay, commonly 5 years, before permanent status or citizenship routes open up. Applicants must prove employment or stable business income, with contracts filed under Portuguese tax law if remote work is involved. Independent freelancers can often qualify, but only if their invoices and receipts demonstrate ongoing income within the country's tax system. Language is also an explicit requirement. Authorities expect residents to make progress in Portuguese, whether through classes or integration exams. This is not treated as optional. It's a test of genuine willingness to join local communities. For households imagining the process will be quick and easy, those rules highlight the need for deeper preparation. Committing to a 5-year stay means aligning career plans, income sources, and housing stability well in advance. Proving income requires clean financial records, something freelancers with irregular contracts sometimes struggle to provide. And learning Portuguese takes sustained effort. Applicants who underestimate this, assuming English alone will suffice, often struggle with bureaucracy, schools, and neighborhood life. For those able to meet the standards, however, the rewards include both modest financial help from councils and a credible route to long-term residency. Where Portugal continues to stand out is in tax treatment for newcomers. Certain residency pathways, including those linked to professionals relocating into rural regions, provide access to favorable tax regimes. For about 10 years, qualifying arrivals can pay reduced income tax rates compared with standard progressive brackets. That predictability makes long-term planning easier, particularly for remote workers drawing foreign income. Depending on earnings, the tax advantage can save tens of thousands of euros over a decade, far more than any one-time municipal relocation payment. Viewed this way, the grants or small subsidies offered by some towns are a short-term bonus, but the real incentive lies in the longer structure of national taxation policy. The application process reflects this dual emphasis: local commitments overseen by municipal officials and legal residency managed by national immigration services. Required documents typically include identification, proof of income, signed housing contracts, and evidence of health insurance. For non-EU citizens, private coverage remains mandatory until public eligibility begins. Translations into Portuguese are often needed, which adds extra cost and time. Processing stretches into several months, and incomplete applications are rejected quickly. Missing income proof or vague housing plans are common pitfalls. Successful applicants are those who prepare well-curated financial documentation and engage directly with both municipal and national authorities. Daily life for those who take up the offer comes with its own adjustments. Small towns deliver slower rhythms and close social ties, but fewer services. Health clinics may offer only basic support, with specialists available hours away. Schools are smaller but integrated into community life. Public transport is limited, so car ownership is a necessity. These realities matter as much as the financial incentives. Families who expect the same ease of services as Lisbon or international hubs may find the trade-offs challenging. Others will consider the quieter environment, lower housing costs, and direct community interaction worthwhile. Integration succeeds or fails less on paperwork and more on local participation. Residents who take part in markets, town events, and daily life tend to be welcomed, even if their Portuguese fluency builds slowly. Those who remain isolated or disengaged often find community bonds hard to form, and the projects stall. Authorities encourage newcomers to invest in language learning early to set the foundation for smoother integration. For children, immersion through schools often accelerates that process. For adults, formal classes remain the most reliable path forward. All of these details add up to a clear picture. Portugal has not stepped away from bringing in new residents. It has adjusted how and why it does so. Real estate-driven golden visas caused political and economic stress through housing inflation. By removing property speculation from the picture, Portugal rebalanced priorities towards stability, rural revival, and skilled contributions. No single payment replaces the golden visa. Instead, a combination of municipal relocation incentives, ongoing tax advantages, and the digital nomad visa form the alternatives. For anyone considering this path, the action items are exact. Confirm local relocation program details directly on municipal sites, since offerings change without central coordination. Check Portugal's official immigration page for the current D8 visa requirements, particularly the listed income thresholds, before applying. And budget realistically for 5 years of residence, language learning, and integration work. For households able to align with that framework, the rewards are credible: a supportive tax structure, long-term residency prospects, and eventual eligibility for EU citizenship. The character of these Portuguese initiatives highlights how governments balance financial incentives with community survival. While details differ between municipalities and national programs, the direction is consistent. Newcomers must bring skills, income, and long-term presence. And as countries adjust their strategies, other destinations are experimenting with very different models, putting themselves forward not with rural housing or tax breaks, but through startup-centered schemes designed to attract global entrepreneurs. Mauritius, startup paradise. Mauritius presents a very different case. A small island nation in the Indian Ocean that is now tying its identity not just to tourism, but to entrepreneurship. Rather than relying on traditional relocation bonuses or property incentives, the country has positioned itself as a testbed for startups. In 2025, the government reaffirmed its Startup Mauritius initiative, offering around 20,000 Mauritian rupees, roughly $430 to qualified founders. The sum itself is modest when set against grants in Europe or North America, but it is not intended to stand alone. The draw lies in the combination of relatively cheap living costs, subsidized incubator spaces, and renewable visas designed for entrepreneurs who want to stretch their capital further while establishing a base in a globally connected location. The structure of the program signals who the government is trying to attract. This is not aimed at retirees, casual relocators, or families in need of a housing subsidy. Candidates are required to apply with a clearly articulated business plan. That plan should describe the venture's funding sources, operational model, target market, and 18-month growth timeline. It's not enough to show up with a concept on paper. Applicants usually appear before review committees that vet proposals in detail, assessing whether an idea can be registered and incorporated under local laws. In many cases, authorities want evidence of initial funding. The background requirement is typically around $15,000 in available capital, whether from savings or investors, though precise figures vary depending on the program stream. Without proof of accessible resources, applications are rarely advanced for review. In this sense, Mauritius filters out hobby projects and insists on founders who are ready to risk their own funds. For many observers, the small grant number can cause hesitation. At first glance, €430 does not compare with the tens of thousands promised in countries like Italy or Switzerland. But the calculation in Mauritius looks different. Monthly rents outside high-end resorts are far lower than equivalent housing in most Western economies. Utility services, food, and internet access remain affordable by international standards, which makes savings and seed capital stretch further. A founder arriving with $15,000 to $20,000 in banked resources can potentially sustain housing, office rental in an incubator space, and basic working expenses for more than a year. The local grant, though modest, provides an initial cushion that, when combined with these structural advantages, lengthens the critical runway for a startup to find its footing. The government's strategy is less about offering significant financing itself and more about lowering the cost structure so small private capital goes further. Residency conditions add to the appeal for those who pass the threshold. Mauritius provides a startup visa track linked directly to business performance. Successful applicants can expect an initial permit of roughly 18 months, renewable if progress is demonstrated. The extension depends on meeting business milestones submitted in the application plan and showing continued access to operating funds. Unlike short-term work permits in some countries that limit options for renewal, this program ties legal residence directly to measurable entrepreneurial activity. For founders, it provides both time and predictability, two resources often missing in other startup hubs, where visas expire just as the business becomes viable. The island's language environment is another practical advantage. Mauritius functions officially in both English and French, two languages widely accessible to international founders. This dual framework reduces the bureaucratic friction seen in relocation schemes across regions where local languages dominate government systems. Business registration, contracts, and banking can be conducted without the heavy cost of translation or the delay of lengthy language acquisition. A working knowledge of at least one of these languages allows a founder to integrate into everyday operations quickly. Mauritian Creole remains common in daily life and local culture, but is not required for establishing or managing a business. In practice, this bilingual base gives entrepreneurs a clearer path to market presence and compliance without long adaptation periods. Practical challenges remain present. The capital requirement is not forgiving. It forces applicants to prove they can fund at least initial operations before being accepted. Authorities verify this directly through bank statements, investor contracts, and other supporting records. Appearing before the approval committee without credible financial evidence usually ends applications on the spot. Beyond this financial filter, expectations set by the mandatory 18-month plan create pressure. Applicants are required to outline clear growth steps, customer acquisition, project milestones, and even revenue benchmarks. Officials revisit those benchmarks during the applicant's stay. Failure to hit targets or visible mismanagement can mean non-renewal of the residence permit. Financial commitment and performance accountability work together to discourage those treating the island solely as an inexpensive place to spend time. Operational costs in practice illustrate why this can still be attractive despite the modest grant and oversight. Office space inside state-linked incubators is offered at rental levels that are a fraction of co-working hubs in Europe or the US. Electricity and internet, while sometimes less robust than in Western capitals, are consistent enough for most early-stage ventures. Daily subsistence remains manageable for individuals and small families willing to adapt. When compared with the thousands of dollars per month startups burn through simply to remain physically present in global tech cities like London, San Francisco, or Berlin, Mauritius positions itself as an affordable launch pad. The government's interest is in giving founders breathing room to fail, adjust, and try again without being priced out after a few months. The country's multicultural profile also plays a part in branding itself as a startup paradise. Descendants of Indian, African, Chinese, and European communities coexist, and both English and French school systems graduate bilingual professionals each year. For international founders, This local workforce is valuable. You can source support staff with varied cultural backgrounds and language skills. Companies using Mauritius as a base can test services here and then expand into surrounding African or Asian markets with the credibility of having navigated multiple languages and cultures at startup stage. That regional reach is key to the government's pitch. Mauritius is not just a quiet island backdrop, but an affordable legal headquarters to scale beyond its borders. Administrative demands, however, are detailed, and applicants should not underestimate them. Documentation includes identification records, translated business proposals, if written in other languages, registration paperwork, and proof of medical insurance. Authorities scrutinize financial origins, with unclear sourcing flagged as a reason for rejection. Failure to provide a thorough 18-month operational plan or secure a residential lease agreement also undermines an application. Legal or accounting help is common, and budgeting extra for this professional support is realistic. The government emphasizes that its own grant must be reserved for operational use. It will not accept entrepreneurs treating funds as personal income or rent subsidy. Misallocating grant money risks termination. Compared with larger relocation initiatives elsewhere, Mauritius' program is modest in its promised amounts, but designed with deliberate trade-offs. Italy's subsidy looks larger, but demands renovation projects that consume resources quickly. Switzerland dangles higher grants, but imposes heavy property investments and age restrictions. By contrast, Mauritius' framework is lighter in upfront gift money, but stronger in the combination of renewable permits, incubation support, and lower baseline living costs. For a founder who arrives prepared, the environment provides meaningful value regardless of the small initial transfer. In practical terms, those who will succeed are entrepreneurs who understand that the local government's contribution is symbolic and supportive, not central. The assumption is that you already come prepared with initial funding and realistic expectations, and that the island is your platform to extend that funding far longer than it would last in a conventional hub. Look at it as a partnership: modest state funds, subsidized infrastructure, and bilingual business culture in exchange for your capital, commitment, and long-term presence. For anyone tempted by the startup paradise promise, a quick self-check clarifies readiness. First, do you have a formal business plan detailed enough to withstand review by a government committee? Second, can you show documented access to sufficient capital before you arrive? Third, are you comfortable adapting to island living or meeting visa requirements tied to your business progress? If the answer to these three is yes, the Mauritius route can be a practical fit. It is these sorts of small but structured programs that reveal the real story of relocation incentives. The numbers on brochures may catch attention, but their meaning depends on deeper obligations, financial, cultural, and personal, that shape whether they work in practice. These incentive schemes all share one reality: they are never as simple as the headlines suggest. None of them provide automatic long-term residency or citizenship. Every path is conditional, tied to visa rules, residency tests, or business performance measures that must be met year after year. Before applying, 3 steps are essential. Verify the official terms directly on the host government's site. Calculate the real costs, including renovation, taxes, and insurance, and consult an immigration or tax professional to understand the obligations. If you want a quick reference, comment the country you're interested in, and we'll point you to the official starting page. In the end, headlines may promise free money, but long-term success comes only with preparation, clarity, and a realistic plan.